Now let's discuss attributions and bias. What are attributions and what is bias? Attributions are judgments or assumptions about why someone behaved in a certain way. And bias is a tendency to think in a way that is not accurate or objective. Here is a video showing it's a TED Talk that I really want you all to check out. It's going to be linked below. Attributions are the explanations that people generate for why things happen. We look for and create explanations for our own behaviors and for the behaviors of other people. On a daily basis, we wonder things like, why did I fail that exam? Why was my coworker late? Why did my friend not wish me a happy birthday? Why did the other driver cut me off? Our answers to those questions are attributions. Your coworker could have arrived late because they were stuck in traffic, their child was sick, or maybe they're always late, or they're disorganized and careless. This means that when we make an attribution, we focus on the importance of certain influences on behavior and minimize the importance of other influences. If you decide your coworker was late because they were disorganized and careless, your attribution is emphasizing the importance of personality and minimizing the importance of circumstances like traffic or a sick child. When we're generating explanations for our own behavior, we are likely to notice and highlight the importance of external or situational causes. For example, when your coworker arrives to work late, you are likely to make an internal attribution for their behavior, believing they are lazy, they are disorganized, or they are careless. If you decide your coworker is late because they're lazy and they don't care about their job, that might lead you to shy away from working on office projects with them and might cause you to discuss disciplinary action with your boss. If you decide your coworker is late because they were stuck in traffic or have a sick kid at home, you might be more sympathetic and want to help them get caught up at work. When you are late, however, you are unlikely to believe yourself to be lazy, disorganized, or careless. Instead, you see the situational pressures that affected you that morning. Your attribution recognizes that you're late because of bad weather, traffic, or a sick kid. Two related patterns of attributions are what we're talking about. These patterns of attributions indicate that when we are generating explanations for another person's behavior, we're likely to overestimate the power of internal or dispositional cues and underestimate the power of external or circumstantial causes. The actor-observer effect is our tendency to attribute one's own actions to external causes, while attributing other people's behaviors to internal causes. So why are these explanations important? At first, attributions might seem inconsequential because they're only thoughts within our heads. They matter, though, because they can influence our behavioral reactions and our feelings. As they're affecting our behavior, there's no objective way in that moment for us to know which possible explanation is correct. In the heat of the moment, it would be almost impossible for you to step back and accurately determine why your coworker is late. Are they careless? Do they have a sick kid at home? We don't know. When we see someone doing something, we tend to think it relates to their personality rather than the situation the person is in. For example, if someone cuts in front of you in line, your immediate reaction is, this person is a total jerk. But in reality, maybe they don't cut into lines, and they're doing it this time because they're in a serious situation, about to miss a plane or to visit a great aunt who is on the verge of death. Interestingly, social psychologists have found that we make the fundamental attribution error about other people, but rarely ourselves. When we do this, we always have a good reason. It's other people we see as defective. This fundamental attribution error is this mistake, right? It's the mistake. We're attributing it to the wrong thing. But attribution error or not, other people are defective. This is in our head. If everyone is more like me, this would be a much better place, right? They're wrong, I'm perfect, and the weather was what happened to me, and they just left late, and that's what happened to them. Many people also tend to take things personally. Maybe you could call this fundamental selfishness error or the all about me effect. This describes the everyday experience of encountering people who don't treat you just right, as the loyalty you implicitly believe that you are. The feeling we have of being disrespected is so common we've shortened it to the word dissed. Someone says something that you feel belittles you, or they ignore you, or talk about food when you want to talk about sports. You've been dissed. Don't they know who you are? If we all take a step back to recognize and accept the fundamental attribution error, we will feel dissed far less often. People are good and decent, and they are subject to the same difficulties in life as we are. When they ignore us or don't say thank you when we hold the door open or step on our feet and don't apologize, we must remember that they're simply fellow sufferers just trying to get through the day just like we are. Research has shown that we don't make these attributions randomly. Instead, there seems to be a predictable pattern and distinction of the attributes we generate. One important distinction involves situational or external versus dispositional or internal attributions. Situational attributions emphasize the influence of situations or circumstances in causing a person's behavior. For example, if you believe the coworker was late because their child's sick or they're stuck in traffic, you're making an external or situational attribution. Dispositional attribution indicates that something internal to the person influenced that behavior. So internal or dispositional attributions argue it is something about the person and who they are that caused their behavior. These types of attributions often blame a person's ability, personality, or effort for their actions. This would be if you decided your coworker was late because they're careless or unorganized, then you're making an internal or dispositional attribution. Here's some examples for us to practice. If Quinn's car breaks down on the highway, they believe it is due to their ignorance about cars. Is this situational or dispositional? Dispositional. Quinn's car breaks down on the highway and they believe it is due to the age and the condition of their car. Is this situational or dispositional? Situational. Frank runs a half marathon and beats his expected time. He believes it's due to the great weather, cool temperatures that day, and no hills in the course. Situational or dispositional? Situational. Frank runs a half marathon and beats his expected time. He believes it is due to him preparing really well, running regularly, and psyching himself up by running the same or longer distances for practice. Situational or dispositional? Dispositional. Lou goes and interviews for a new job and is not hired. He believes it's due to the company not really needing anyone for that position, and they're just interviewing to make the company look like it's growing when it's not. Situational or dispositional? Situational. Lou goes for a job interview and is not hired, and he believes it's due to his lack of preparedness, being late, and not being able to smoothly answer any of the interview questions because he was super nervous. Situational or dispositional? Dispositional. Let's talk about self-serving bias. What do we know about this? We know that people tend to take credit for their successes and try to avoid blame for their failures. To do this, people make internal attributions to explain their triumphs and external attributions to explain away their downfalls and defeats. Imagine you do well on an exam. How do you explain your performance? And imagine you failed an exam. How do you explain your performance? According to research on self-serving bias, when you do well, you are likely to make an internal attribution and decide it's something about you and who you are that led you to do well. You might decide you did well because you studied hard, because you're a talented student, and because you're meant to be a business person. Research also argues that when you do poorly on an exam, you're likely to make an external attribution and blame the situation or circumstance for your performance. So you might decide you did poorly on your exam because you have a terrible instructor, because you were working too many hours, because your kid kept you up all night. These examples both illustrate self-serving bias. And don't worry if you show this pattern of thought. Research in social psychology argues that this bias is normal, and it actually helps us to remain happy and maintain our self-esteem. Other types of bias. In-group bias is a preference for our group over other groups, and representative bias is a faulty heuristic in which you stereotype someone or something without a valid reason for your judgment. Remember, a heuristic is like a mental shortcut. We're going to talk about cognitive dissonance. Here is a video that I'm going to link below. Cognitive dissonance is a psychological discomfort situation, and this arises from holding two or more inconsistent attitudes, behaviors, or cognitions. Remember, cognitions are thoughts, beliefs, or opinions. Festinger is a researcher whose theory of cognitive dissonance states that when we experience a conflict in our behaviors, attitudes, or beliefs that runs counter to our positive self-perception, we experience psychological discomfort or dissonance. For example, if you believe smoking is bad for your health, but you continue to smoke, your experience conflicts between your belief and your behavior. In this example, we can see the cognitive dissonance is kind of in the middle. So, on one hand, we have smoking is bad for our health. We know it is, we see the labels and the packaging, so maybe we quit smoking by using the patch or finding some other way to get there. On the other side, maybe you're saying, well, I'm a smoker, and then you're saying research is inconclusive, and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to keep smoking. But either way, we have to remove that dissonance, either by changing the behavior or changing the way we think about the behavior. Research has documented that only conflicting cognitions that threaten our individual positive self-image cause dissonance. Also, research found that dissonance is not only psychologically uncomfortable, but can also make physiological arousal and activate regions of the brain important in emotions and cognitive functioning. When we experience cognitive dissonance, we are motivated to decrease it because it is psychologically, physically, and mentally uncomfortable. We can reduce dissonance by bringing our cognitions, attitudes, and behaviors in line. That is, making them harmonious. This can be done in different ways, like changing the behavior, changing our cognition or the way we think about that behavior through rationalization, or adding a new cognition. Let's talk about implicit bias. Implicit bias, also known as implicit prejudice or implicit attitude, is a negative attitude of which someone is not consciously aware against a specific social group. This is thought to be shaped by experience and based on learned associations between particular qualities and social categories, including race or gender. Individuals' perceptions and behaviors can be influenced by the implicit biases they hold, even if they're unaware they hold such biases. An aspect of implicit social cognition is the phenomenon that perceptions, attitudes, and stereotypes can operate prior to conscious intention or endorsement. What that means is we can make a decision about something without even realizing we're making that decision, and sometimes those decisions we're not even thinking about have bias. Next, let's talk about microaggressions. These are small, often interpersonal or subtle acts of exclusion or discrimination. It's a metric by which we measure inclusion, often in the reverse, so relative presence of microaggressions indicates the relative lack of inclusion. Implicit biases can impact our relationships and interactions with each other in many different ways, some of which are described in the research findings that we're about to talk about. One way that implicit biases can manifest is in the form of microaggressions. These are subtle, verbal, or nonverbal insults or denigrating messages communicated towards a marginalized person, often by someone who may be well-intentioned but completely unaware of the impact of their words or actions. Examples of common microaggressions include statements like, "Where are you really from? What are you? You don't act like a normal Black person. You're really pretty for a dark-skinned girl." Implicit biases are attitudes or stereotypes that unconsciously affect our actions, decisions, and understanding. These biases can be positive, a preference for someone or something, or negative, an aversion to or a fear of something or someone. Implicit biases are different from known biases that people may choose to conceal for social or political reasons. In fact, implicit biases are often in conflict with a person's explicit or declared beliefs. Implicit biases are formed over a lifetime as a result of exposure to direct and indirect messages. The media plays a large role in this formation process. Implicit biases are pervasive. Everyone has them on some level about something. But, super important takeaway message here, they are changeable. But this process takes the realization that the bias is there, it takes time, it takes intention, and it takes training. Microaggressions can be based on any aspect of a marginalized person's identity, and these individual microaggressions might not be devastating to the person experiencing them, but their cumulative effects over time can be quite large. Often, microaggressions are not meant to hurt, they're done with little conscious awareness of their meanings and effects. But the slow accumulation during childhood and over a lifetime is what defines a marginalized experience, making explanation and communication with someone who does not share this identity very difficult. Social others are microaggressed hourly, daily, weekly, monthly. It is a continuous process. Here's a video about microaggressions that will be linked below. Here's another video that has a great description of implicit bias research. It will also be linked below.